Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pat Falk. I'm the chair of the Cecil County Democratic Central Committee. Welcome to our forum. Before we actually begin, I know I just asked you to sit down, but would you please stand for the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the candidates who are here please take their seats at the front table? I think there is one person who has not arrived. He is on his way. I'm told we'll be here in about 5 minutes.
She's here.
I can pause it.
Is Allison here? Okay. Just some quick announcements before we actually get started. The event today is sponsored by the Cecil County Democratic Central Committee, but it's co-sponsored by the Cecil County Democrat Club. I'd like the members of the Central Committee to stand, please. I know there are a few here. Okay, we have Lindsay Burton and Devis in the back, Franklin Max over here, Sharon Wigan here, and Mike Welker. Did I miss any members of the committee? Great. We want to thank the Democrat Club for all of the hard work that they've done to help bring this forum to you today. Thank them so much for all of the things that they have set up in the back. Mike's going to talk more about that. And for the refreshments, there's a refreshment table over there. So thank them very much. And not just for today, but for many other ways, we are working together to achieve our shared goals. We're planning to further our partnership in the coming weeks and months, especially prior to the general election. And we're pleased to facilitate this opportunity for candidates for Congress from the 1st Congressional District to articulate their views on the issues. All of our candidates are Democrats. We want the public to get to know them and get them to know the public and to talk to them about their platform. And I'm so happy to see a good turnout today. And so thank you all very much for coming. And thank you to the candidates for coming today too. Following the forum, there'll be a meet and greet here. Our plan was to start at 2 o'clock, finish the question and answer session by 4 o'clock, and then adjourn this portion of it, and then the candidates would like to mingle and talk to you individually. So please stay if you can, and take advantage of the opportunity. I know they're looking forward to it. So that's really all I have to say. I'm going to ask Mike Welker, who is the president of the Democrat Club, to say a few words.
Thanks, Pat. Like you said, my name is Mike Welker. I am the president of the Cecil County Democrat Club. If everyone that is in our elections committee could please stand up, raise your hands. Elections committee, I know you're all out there. Stand up. Stand up, raise your hands. These people did a fantastic job helping us get this set up. The Central Committee definitely could not have hit this off without their hard work and dedication. Our events committee also helped pitch in and helped us get some of our refreshments and help us get some of the other things set up. So do we have people from our events committee here? I know I saw a couple people from the events committee. Ah, there we go. There's all 2 people on our events committee. There's been a lot of work. Along the back, we do have a table set up with some candidate literature. So by all means, at the end, Go over there, peruse some of the candidate literature, take some home, share with your friends and your neighbors, get the word out about these fantastic candidates. They did take time out of their day to come all the way to Elkton. I don't know how many of you know, District 1 is huge. So a round of applause for our candidates that are out here for us. Great job, guys. So we're going to go. Is there anything else you want to say? Or? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it back over.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I guess I just want to close by saying that I hope when you leave here today, or I think we all hope this, you'll be better informed about the candidates and their views, and that you'll continue to learn more about them and attend more events like this, open to the public, where you can ask the questions that are important to you and get to know the candidates. Again, the one-on-one means so much more than just seeing them on TV or picking up a brochure, which is also nice, but we hope it'll be of value to you. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Phyllis Kilby. There's Phyllis. Phyllis is a former Cecil County Commissioner, a very successful businesswoman, and someone who continues to give generously of her time in the service of her community. Thank you for doing this, Phyllis, and thank you for your service.
Let's get this show on the road. I thought Mike was going to go through his spiel about what he's doing as far as timing is concerned, but since
I can't.
you want to do it, he's got a loud voice.
All right, so candidates, you're going to have 3 minutes for introductions. These fancy schmancy cards that I picked up at Staples mean you got 30 seconds left and your time is up. So I'll be sitting back here when you see me raise this. It's about time to start closing up. After the 3-minute introduction, when she asks questions, you'll each have 2 minutes to answer the questions and then we'll move down the line. Sound good?
Actually, that's not what I'm doing, but go ahead.
Okay. Either way, as long as you know that this is 30 seconds, this means time's up, we'll be good to go.
And if you really go over time, I brought the ultimate. So no matter whether you're done or not, they won't be able to hear you. Okay, so I decided that in this process, I'm not going to stand up here, obviously, and introduce these candidates. It's more important that they talk to you and tell you what they want you to know about them. I mean, if there's anything I dislike is a long introduction. So, we're going to go alphabetically down the row. They all have 3 minutes each to talk about themselves. So I am not going to introduce the next person. You can just keep on chugging along.
Can you hear me if I talk without a microphone? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much for having us. My first name is Jesse. My last name is Colvin. That's C-O-L-V-I-N. That's all be on the ballot. By way of introduction, I'm a 4th-generation Marylander. My great-great-grandfather came here to the Port of Baltimore in 1899. We've been here ever since. My parents are hippies. Shared a VW van together at University of Maryland Law School, and they became public servants. My dad has been in the public defender's office in Maryland for 33 years. My mom is a judge. My life changed on 9/11. I think they had a law school picked out for me. I was intensely curious about the 9/11 attacks, so I went to college and I studied Arabic and Middle East history, and I went to Egypt, and then I graduated and I went to Syria in 2006, and I taught English to Iraqi refugees, and that experience led me to join the military. I served in the Army as an intelligence officer. I spent a year near the demilitarized zone in Korea as part of the tripwire, and I had a chance to try out for the Army Rangers. I served 4 combat deployments to Afghanistan. I had the GI Bill available to me. I did that at Columbia University, and then I worked inside in an investment bank, not to enrich myself personally. I was part of a team identifying internal fraud, illegal and illicit activity, kind of like what led to the housing crisis. My wife and I really have every reason not to be doing a campaign like this. We just got married over a year ago. We just welcomed our first child 3 weeks ago. At some point after the presidential election, there was no lightning bolt moment, but I turned to my wife and said, we got to do something. and she runs a nonprofit to prevent military veteran suicide. So she said, I'm doing pretty good work, you can go figure it out. We live here in the district, we're in Baltimore County. We looked in our own backyard and saw Mr. Harris, who needs no introduction in this room. And that's how we got here today. So thank you very much for having us, and I'm looking forward to meeting you today. So thank you.
Can you hear me? I might not be as loud as Jesse. I'm Allison Galbraith. I am the child of 2 college professors. My father taught at Harvard Community College for 45 years. He was also a hippie in the Peace Corps. And my mom started healthcare programs at the university. She started the first cohort cell weekend program at a public university in Maryland. That was the Health Systems Management program at University of Baltimore. And she also started the nursing program at Morgan State University. I'm very proud of her work, and a lot of who she was got me here today. So I went to University of Maryland. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and I returned there several years later for graduate coursework in public policy. Somewhere in between there, I was going to go to law school and got distracted by a soldier, so I went out to Fort Hood, and we moved back when I had kids. And, we have been in Bel Air my entire life, except for that brief time in Fort Hood and time in college in DC. Grew up in historic Bel Air. I love this district. My mother is from the Eastern Shore. She's buried on the Eastern Shore now. And she got me here. So we came back to Maryland, and after I had my son, I couldn't buy health insurance because I had had a complicated pregnancy. And women were charged 30 to 80% more than men for the same policy without maternity care, even if you didn't have any pre-existing conditions, right? Like having had a child or a C-section. So I went to work for DoD. I worked my way up from the lowest of the low unionized positions at Aberdeen Test Center and all the way up to the 2-star staff levels of Department of Defense. And I made it my business to understand exactly how the federal government works. I picked up professional certifications in a dozen different areas. I have a certificate in FDA regulatory affairs. I navigate the most complicated processes that we have in our federal government for a living, and I have a proven track record of actually saving the federal government money. I got into this because my mom got sick. I started a business, and the only reason I could keep it when I got separated from my ex was because ACA ended those gender rate hikes. And when I went in to see Andy Harris, and I said, listen, I'm gonna lose my health insurance, and I'm gonna lose my business, and I'm a single mom, and my mom is sick, and I can't do anything else. I can't work 9 to 5 with caregiver obligations. I asked him about gender rate hikes. He said, I don't think most people would mind if women paid more for health insurance. I didn't think most people would mind if I took his job either.
So can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm Michael Pullen. I'm a progressive. We're running a grassroots campaign called Pullen for Us. I'm the Eastern Shore candidate. My wife and I moved to the Eastern Shore over 40 years ago, and we've lived there in the same house over 40 years, and we've lived in the 1st District longer than any other candidate here today. I'm also the only candidate that's ever held public office. I served as the Talbot County Attorney for nearly 25 years. I'm also the only candidate that's ever run for election in the 1st District. I was on the ballot in 2016, and I was elected by the voters in the 1st District as a delegate to the 2016 Democratic National Convention. Throughout my career as the county attorney, I worked for 7 different county councils, both Republicans and Democrats. And I continued to earn the confidence and the trust and the respect of each of those councils through hard work, doing my homework, and being a straight shooter. I drafted and developed legislation, sometimes competing legislation for different members of the council on the same issue. For example, one of the pieces of legislation I developed was to protect the Chesapeake Bay. It was a local ordinance. It was so effective that the following year, the Maryland General Assembly used that as a model to adopt statewide legislation to protect the bay. And that legislation remains in effect to protect the bay throughout our state, and I'm very proud of that. Now, I've represented folks in the 1st District my entire career, waitresses, watermen, families, small businesses, local governments, and that's what I do. I know how to represent folks. I have done that for my entire career, and I have always put their interest first. And that's what I intend to do as your congressman. I want to listen to your interests, I want to find out what your concerns are, and I want to represent your interests. Now, I like my job as county attorney, and I was good at it. So why did I leave? We have a crisis of leadership in Washington, D.C. And I feel so strongly about what we must do that I feel compelled to do everything I can. That's why I ran for DNC in 2016. That's why I started a grassroots group on the Eastern Shore to work for progressive change. And that's why I'm running for Congress. That's what I want to represent this district the way it needs to be represented and fight for progressive change, the change that will benefit us, our families, workers, students, seniors. So that's why I'm in this race. Thank you. I see the red card.
Okay, can you all hear me? All right, my name's Steve Worton. I'm formerly a resident of Cecil County. I lived up here for 20 years, about a mile off the road. My boys played down on Main Street, baseball, basketball, football. So I love the county, so you all know I'm from here. I'm running for Congress really to represent everyone in this room. I don't feel the Republicans are doing that, and I think I have the best shot to hit the ground running in Congress. People have asked me my views on immigration. My grandparents came from Pullen. They were coal miners. Obviously, this country was built on immigration. We need people to help us even with, as you've read, the picking the crabs this year, because now we're going to have this lottery where we don't have enough people to support us on the Eastern Shore and support the people, the watermen that are trying to sell their goods. So I'm really for immigration, if anyone wants to ask. I started the Proving Ground back in 1982. I went down to the Pentagon in 1995. I was appointed by Secretary Rumsfeld as a senior executive in 2001. I ran operations around the world. I testified before Congress. I prepared testimony. I prepared legislation. I worked with staffers on the Hill to get work done. I also cut a lot of people in the federal government through efficiencies. So I know how to hit the ground running. And that's important. And if you look across at all the other candidates, and I like every one of them, I would ask, do they have federal experience? Do they know what it's like to work with Congress? Have they been on the Hill? Have they run that little rail car between the Senate and the House building? Have they written legislation? Those are important things, because you can't just go down to Congress and expect to start and take over. You have to know where to start. You have to know how to work with the people that are down there. The first thing I want to do when I go down to Congress is try and fix the deficit. In February, it was $215 billion alone. Annually, we used to run $500 billion deficits. In 10 years, that deficit's going to be 27 trillion. The interest on that is going to be $800 billion. That's more than the entire defense budget. And the Republicans have a plan to fix that, and they're going to do it by cutting Medicare. They're going to do it by cutting Social Security. If you're a federal employee, they're going to raise your retirement age and eliminate your COLA. I'm a former federal employee. I assure you that won't happen when I'm there. There are things that can be done to fix this. We can back up the tax cuts given to corporations. We can get permanent cuts to the middle class who will actually grow the economy. We can get rid of the legislation that took away Medicare's ability to negotiate drug prices. We can make this all work. We have to do it together. I need your vote. I'd like to represent you, and I thank you very much for your time.
I have a series of questions here that have been submitted by the Democratic Club and the Democratic Central Committee, which I'm going to go through, but I'm going to leave ample time for questions from the audience. So my plan is, I'm not going to take the first question and have everybody answer the same thing. So each candidate's going to get a different question. So they may want to, you may want to at some point direct a similar question to another candidate that didn't get to answer that particular question. The candidates have exactly 2 minutes to answer each question. There's no rebuttal. We're not going to have a back and forth. I may look small, but I'm a good enforcer. Ask my husband. Okay, so, and the other thing today is, keep it all civilized. I'm sure you're all good civilized people, so let's have a nice discussion. Okay, we're going to start alphabetically with, I'm going to call you by your first name, if that's okay. Didn't ask permission, here we go. Jesse, one of the things I think that's very concerning to the people, particularly here in Cecil County, among others, everything is intertwined. If you're ever in government, you can't just tackle one thing because it's all connected to everything else. Anyway, but let's start with jobs and economic development. You always hear candidates say, we're going to bring quality jobs to the county or to the district or, whatever. Do you have any specifics on how we could do that?
We do. Jobs of the Future is one of the platforms, one of the planks of our platform. We talk about jobs of the future. So things like solar, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the state and the country. There's no reason, there's one community college right now in our state that has a solar program. It's in Montgomery County. There's no reason that the 2- and 4-year schools in our district, particularly the 2-year schools, Cecil College, for example, couldn't have one. Same with cyber. Our environmental platform is 10 billion oysters by 2025. Related to that is jobs. We need to scale up oyster farms. Aquaculture could be a program in a 2-year school, oyster farming. None of this will happen without a serious investment in high-speed broadband and high-speed internet. We have a massive broadband issue in our district. We have it here at Cecil as well. At some point in the late 20s, we decided that every community deserved electricity. That's how we got the Rural Electrification Act. Every home, every neighborhood is going to get it. We need to get there with broadband. We need to get there soon. Yes, they all are connected, but jobs of the future. Thank you.
Okay, Allison. There's a variety of immigration programs now that are on the chopping block or have been back and forth through the courts, and they're on again, off again. There was just an announcement, I think, that the Guatemalans are losing their TPA or TPS status, which is the temporary protected status, which has happened to several other groups within the last several weeks. So talk to us a little bit in 2 minutes about immigration, DACA, and TPS.
As a kid, I grew up with international students in my house all the time from my mother being there, and she used to have to submit these requests up to Barbara Mikulski and ask for assistance with their visas and things like that. I think it's worth noting that our economy revolves pretty heavily around immigrant labor, and also that there is some value in being just a decent human being and giving people opportunity where they otherwise wouldn't have it, or where their own countries are not giving them the conditions that they need to thrive. And DACA in particular it's a very important program. And the TPS also for refugees, we need to be giving people the opportunities that prior generations had. My grandfather came here as a baby from Scotland. He grew up to be a carpenter. But that's the American dream, is that you can come here and you can have a path to citizenship and you can work and you can support yourself. And I think it's time that looked at this problem with a little less fear of the unknown and embraced other cultures and made sure that we're having a conversation within our communities about the importance of cultural diversity. Because I think a lot of this is rooted actually in the fact that people are simply not talking to each other across the aisle. And so I would certainly support immigration reform. I would support programs that allowed a pathway to citizenship. I also support border security because I've worked in defense and I've got experience with that too. So we just need to make sure that we have sane and humane immigration policies that work for everybody who wants to contribute to this society.
Okay, obviously being a dairy farmer, I have to throw in a farmer type question, which was not one of the ones that was submitted by the Democrat.
We'll allow it, you're fine.
There's been a lot of talk lately about tariffs and trade wars. Some of the information that I've gotten just today, obviously get farmer type information. The U.S. exports for dairy have increased 26% compared to the same month last year. Farm exports are extremely important to the United States. Our relationships with Mexico, our relationships with Canada, our relationship with China. So talk to me a little bit about exports and tariffs and how you feel.
Thanks for that question. I want to talk about soybeans in particular because that's a pretty pervasive crop here in our district. We have 12,800 soybean farmers in Maryland. We export about $200 million worth of soybeans to China every year. They are the major importer of soybeans. Now, when President Trump announced potential tariffs against China, they of course retaliated, and one of the things they did was to identify soybeans as a crop that they were going to place tariffs on. What that did was, in the Chicago Board of Trade, soybean futures lost 40 cents that day. Farmers throughout the district have their planting plans all done, and they are in a pickle because they are put in a position completely self-inflicted by this administration about what to do with their planting plans, and my understanding is most of them are going to continue on as scheduled. But nevertheless, point is that there is no need for the tariffs that this administration has imposed. President Trump says that trade wars are easy to win. Unfortunately, the facts are quite different. No one wins from a trade war. We shouldn't be put in this position. Our congressman has done nothing to protect the farmers in our district. And with your help, when I'm there, I will. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, one of the pervasive problems, situations, crises, not only in Cecil County, but throughout the United States, is the opioid crisis. We hear a lot about treating this as a law enforcement problem. I'd like to hear what your ideas are on helping to solve this opioid crisis.
Okay, opioid crisis is pretty complex. There's really two sides of it, right? The people that buy it and use it, and the families that get hurt. Those people, when they go for treatment, are receiving treatment, and they're getting it for 30 days, and then they're sending them back to their homes or halfway houses, and they're relapsing over and over and over. And anybody in this room that's had that problem in your family or knows someone knows that's true. So it's not just an enforcement issue. And our way of treating it so far has been, from the federal government, Let's throw $6 billion at it and see what happens. Okay, if you're going to keep doing it wrong, throwing more money at it is just making it worse. Every treatment facility will tell you that you have to keep the people in longer, and that you have to get them past their cravings, and you have to assist them and their families when they're done. So that's not an enforcement issue. In fact, one of the candidates said if you fail 3 times in recovery, you're 3 strikes and you're out. Well, he's not here today, but that's obviously crazy. The second part of this is we know about the opioid distributors, and we know that they have unfairly attracted and given drugs to the people of our country, and they need to be prosecuted. That's the enforcement function that I'm talking about. And also, it's not just opioids. There's still methamphetamines on the street, there's still heroin, there's still cocaine, there's still a lot of other drugs that are being abused. And the people that are selling them, that's where we need to get enforcement. So I'm for a 2-pronged approach. Treatment for the people that need it, and extended treatment, and punishment for the people that deliver those goods unfairly to our families and ruin the fabric of our society. Thank you.
Okay, Jesse, you're up next. There's been a lot of, in this current administration, talk about climate change and the science behind it and their attitude towards it. Could you talk to us a little bit about climate change and how you view that, and the use of scientific research and knowledge in actually running agencies and promoting laws?
It's the nicest way to describe Scott Pruitt I've heard yet. Yeah, I mean, one of the first orders of business will be whatever Scott Pruitt or his replacement is up to is to bring a 2x4 to the chaos coming out of the EPA. You don't need to look any further in our district to understand the effects of climate change. If you go to Dorchester County, or you've seen Tom Horton's recent movie, documentary, sea level rise, water level rise is real, and Irma recently happened, and Harvey recently happened, and even for the most skeptical folks on the right, we bring it back to recent events. That's why I'm so excited about our 10 billion oysters by 2025 platform. We have a serious sea level rise issue on the Eastern Shore. Dorchester County really is ground zero. There will be some homes and neighborhoods that will be inhabitable in as quickly as 15, 20, 25 years. If you want to protect shoreline and you want to strengthen it from a storm coming, an oyster bed or an oyster reef on the side of that shore will protect it. So when you said these issues intersect, you're absolutely right. You asked me about my jobs program, I talked about 10 billion oysters. And it also intersects with the environment. So if we want to do something locally to try to prepare for what we know is coming, let's talk about 10 billion oysters. And then if we're talking facing Washington, yes, it's going to be a lot of defense for the next 2 years, for the final 2 years of the administration, whether it's Scott Pruitt or his replacement. It is one of that and the Department of Education is going to need some serious defense from whoever represents this district, because there's some chaos coming out of Washington, and those are probably areas A and area B where we need to start. So thank you very much.
Allison, having a small son, I know you're probably very familiar with this, and everybody in this room relies on public education one way or the other, even if they don't have. I used to tell my constituents who were complaining to me that they didn't have any kids in the school system, so why should they be paying all these taxes? And I kept telling them, but these kids are funding your Social Security. You want them to grow up, you want them to have good jobs, you want them to be educated. So Allison, we've looked on the news lately and seen across the United States a lot of teacher strikes, funding for education, funding for teachers. Can you talk to us a little bit about public education and the role of the federal government in that?
So I am the mother of a public school student. here in Hartford County, and so I'm very, very concerned personally about our public school system. Because a lot of people have no other choice. You start talking about school choice programs. That is a federal level bill that we've seen come up, school choice. And Andy Harris even co-sponsored it, and it was basically eliminating the Department of Education, eliminating all standards associated with education, and then block granting all of the funds to individuals so that they could choose the school that they wanted to send their children to. Now, I'm not sure, can you raise your hand if you have experience with the special education system and ever trying to get an individual education plan, an IEP? How difficult is that? So, a lot of the federal funding could be used to increase those types of programs, make it easier to get those services for our kids and make sure that everybody is getting the education that they need and that they deserve. And it's such an important thing because, as you said, these kids grow up. They're going to be our caregivers one day. We need to make sure that every child who's graduating from an American high school is prepared to either join the workforce directly or that they have the skills and the tools that they need to go to a trade school or a community college or a university across this country and graduate without deep, deep debt, basically a mortgage worth of debt. Those are areas that the federal government can help, and those are areas where the federal government can also stop taking away some of the standards that are so important that we have for our kids in our schools.
Okay, Michael, the economy seems to be chugging along. Stock market is up, unemployment rate is down. And then we have the chaplain who was asked to hand in his resignation, supposedly because of a prayer that he gave, exhorting the Congress to maybe remember the poor. Poor is a word we don't use anymore. We don't, that's kind of been shoved to the background. So could you talk to us a little bit about the 1% versus the rest of us?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Can you all hear me? Yes. So we have seen an enormous transfer of wealth from the middle and the working class to the top 1%. This began in the 1970s when productivity and workers' wages diverged for the first time. What we've seen is that American productivity has increased and continued to go up on the same curve, but workers' wages have been flat. Currently, 84% of this recent tax scam is going to be transfer wealth to the top 1%. A couple points about this tax bill. Number one, as you point out, the economy has been doing wonderfully. Corporations are making record profits. There was no need for the tax bill in the first place. Typically, when the economy does as well as it has been doing, taxes are raised to reduce the deficit, to prepare for the inevitable downturn when you need that cash reserve to pump into the economy, as was done in 2008, to save General Motors, to save the banking industry, not only in this country, but worldwide. Credit markets had frozen. We need to reverse the income inequality in this country by supporting workers' rights, supporting unions, increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. People who work full-time should not live in poverty. People should not have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to get by. People are working harder and harder and harder and struggling harder and harder and harder. We need to reinforce the middle class, and I see the red, so I'm going to stop. Thank you.
going to avoid that cowbell. Okay, this wouldn't be a Democratic forum unless we didn't ask this question or one related to it. We live in a rural area, and my son-in-law, well, I have a grandson who is at the end of May is graduating from the Marines, or whatever you call that. Anyway, guns have been in our family, not our immediate family, but, you know, they're hunters, they're, you know, so Second Amendment rights are very important, we understand that. But talk to me, Steve, about how you could promote conversation that would involve some logical solutions that would hopefully help prevent things like the Parkland shooting.
So right away out of the Parkland shooting, we see some things, and I guess really strong gun advocates or supporters pretty much say everything goes. And I think that's a little bit ludicrous. Truly, the person that shot all those folks in Vegas used something called a bump stock. It essentially takes a semi-automatic assault rifle and turns it into darn near a fully operating machine gun. No action's been taken to really stop the bump stocks. There's been no real control or no uniformity across the United States for when a person can own a gun. Frankly, we need to have a standard on an age across the United States. We need to have solid background checks that are standard, because we know even people getting discharged from the services dishonorably have not had their background checks or information of a negative background check submitted. So we need to increase the age, do the background checks, and I don't want to take away guns from people because they've been around the United States forever, and I frankly don't think we'll be able to do that ever, nor would I suggest it, because I think they're legitimate. I do not think that assault rifles fall into a category either of something that everyone should possess. They're far too dangerous, they create too much damage when people are injured. The Washington DC shooter, when he shot people, he had major injuries that could not be corrected. So I am for limiting assault rifles, and if we can get a dialogue with the Republicans or conservatives to reduce and eliminate that, standardize some other things, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Jesse, I have a softball question for you. One of the things in my mind and a lot of people's minds is that seems to be going on in Congress is that no one is able to talk to each other. Everybody gets into their corners and is not giving an inch. And there is no compromise there. So what I'd like to know from you is, what is there in your background or in your training or, you know, your life experience that makes you think that you would be able to bridge that gap and maybe actually do something radical like reach across the aisle and work with other people?
My Arabic is pretty rusty, but my wife is a Republican, so I speak pretty good Republican. We wanted to go visit with some of the local fraternal order police chapters in the district early on in the campaign, and we reached out and they said, "Oh, Army Ranger, that's great. We'd love to have him." And I was always a Democrat, so Tuesday's not good for us. My wife still speaks pretty good cop, and we had a chance to meet with some folks actually here in Cecil County. And I walked in and I said, "We're an organization that is Democratic in need and Republican in value." And I thought that was really interesting. The need part was they were labor. At the end of the day, they're a labor organization, collective bargaining, better pay, better pension. Andy Harris had voted against a collective bargaining agreement in the state Senate, so that was the opening. And then the values piece was, they said, "We're small government folks, and you're a Democrat, so we expect you to come in and start talking about bathrooms." And I said, "Why? That's an important issue, but I'd much rather talk to you about jobs of the future, 10 billion oysters, opioids." So, well, that's what Democrats talk about.
So part of it is we've just become so polarized and so tribal that we've forgotten how to talk to each other. We recently just got endorsed by Congressman Wayne Gilchrist, who, as you know, is from the other side of the aisle. We don't agree on everything. We certainly agree on many things related to the environment. He talked about integrity when he gave his speech. It was integrity. Part of that is grounded in our common military service. I served in the Rangers. I was stationed in southern Georgia. I was certainly usually the token Democrat in the team room. But it comes down to character and integrity, and you know, Congress is broken, and we do need new blood. And part of it is we got to get to the point where compromise is not a dirty word, and compromise really is the solution. Because if we don't, everybody in this room gets hurt. Thank you.
Allison, you talked a little bit at the beginning about your difficulty with getting health care. Could you talk to us a little bit about what your views of the Affordable Health Care Act is, and how you would either work with that, get rid of it, fix it, do whatever?
One of the things that's really important to understand about the Affordable Care Act is that, one, it gave us a series of consumer protections. So lifetime caps are now gone. Denials for pre-existing conditions. You must cover substance abuse treatment. You must cover mental health treatment. You must cover these preventive care services. Women have health care rights that we've never had in history because of ACA. And pre-existing conditions. They can't deny you because of pre-existing conditions. Now, a lot of people say that ACA has hurt them. Chances are, if ACA has hurt them, it's because they had employer-provided policies. And ACA went and rocked the employer-provided policies in a way that I think a lot of people didn't expect. It's now very expensive for family coverage. Before it used to be you could stick 10 kids under one family plan and have one price. And it didn't change no matter how many kids you had on there. And your spouse was just kind of covered, and it was affordable. But people would have higher deductibles, and a lot of things weren't covered, and pre-existing conditions would get booted sometimes. But unless you had that experience, you probably didn't know that that was what was going on. What the ACA helped is the people who were buying in the private market. The people who were buying in the private market, like myself, it was prohibitively expensive. Even, I mean, I would have had to go in the high-risk pool at 26 years old because I had a pregnancy where I had a C-section and postpartum depression. And these things wouldn't have been covered. And it'd be the equivalent of paying $600 a month today for a 26-year-old who is guilty of nothing but having a baby. So we need to understand ACA isn't black and white. It's not a permanent solution by any means. We need to be moving towards universal health care. Single payer is better for small businesses. It gives people a lot of opportunities that otherwise wouldn't exist. And it's cheaper. So from an economic standpoint, it makes perfect sense to make sure everybody has the coverage that they need and deserve.
Okay. One of the problems that's pointed to as one of the root causes, Michael, for the inertia in Congress is that state legislators have gerrymandered districts so that there are so many safe districts, as they call them, that the people who actually win those districts have no reason to compromise or no reason to talk to the other side and just sort of dig their heels in. So do you have any thoughts on gerrymandering or what we could do about that?
Yes, thanks. Gerrymandering is one of the root causes of the problems that we're having in our democracy today. The other root cause is money in politics. And what we are seeing is actually the corrosion of our democracy and the corrosion of our democratic process for exactly that reason. Andy Harris came to a town hall at Chesapeake College in March of 2017 and basically said, you know, I'm the beneficiary of gerrymandering, and as much as I enjoy the benefits of that, we have to do something about it. Well, The reality is, we do have to do something about that. Now, there are 2 cases pending in front of the Supreme Court right now about that issue, and we can hope that they do something about it. State legislatures do the districting for congressional districts. There are criteria that they can adopt. They can adopt independent districting commissions. Many states have done that. There are criteria that they can adopt in terms of contiguous, compact, don't skip over an existing population area to go further out. Don't draw the district lines taking into account where a certain congressperson lives, what the voting history has been, what the party affiliation has been. All of those things are necessary. This is an essential reform that we need to grapple with because our democracy is being eroded and it's toxic. We need to deal with this issue in a fair way so that we can move forward and become the country that our founders intended and work across party lines and listen to our constituents and do what the constituents want and have multi-party districts. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, we're going to bring you back to the land. Part of the first congressional district, obviously, a very integral and important part of it is the Bay. We have our farmers, we have our watermen, we have the environmentalists. So how do you mix all those together and come up with a formula that helps us improve the life of the Bay without making adversaries of all these people?
Well, it's a good question. They're really competing, right? The poultry farmers really are in a terrible fight on the Eastern Shore, but there's a means here where everyone can certainly work together. I'll start a little bit outside of that at the Conowingo Dam. We know that's getting ready to just overflow with silt, and there's been a lot of proposals to take care of that, and none have been adopted yet. That certainly is going to help the Bay. As far as the aquaculture and things like that, Jesse's brought up the 10 billion oysters, and I know that's the Eastern Shore goal is 10 billion oysters, and I think everybody supports that, and it's a cooperation between NOAA, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Association, the Corps of Engineers, and others to bring that forward. So I think we can do that. The real part I think you were getting at with your question, though, is how do we make all these people cooperate and make it such that everybody stays healthy, the poultry farmers and the Bay, so there's not significant runoff and ammonia and all those kinds of things. And really that's being done with some of the extension services and things like that, where they talk about best practices to reduce and eliminate those things so that we can all live together and support the population at the same time. So I think from the federal standpoint, how we can help that is to continue to encourage the extension services of the universities and to provide some type of subsidies for folks to encourage a good way of farming so that we protect the Bay. Thank you.
Okay, now it's your chance. If you have a question, raise your hand. I don't have a roaming microphone, so you're going to have to use your outside voice, okay? And if it's a little weak, I'll try to repeat it up here. So let's start in the back.
I won't use the microphone because I'm not accustomed to those, and I don't do karaoke anyways. But I have a question for Mr. Colvin, and I'm concerned about your association with what a lot of observers consider a neoconservative right-wing think tank. And that's the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And they've been strong supporters of Netanyahu and his conservative party. No other group has done more to lobby against the Iran nuclear treaty, and also and also a lot of their funding comes from supporters of Netanyahu, and also a lot of big donors who have given money to Trump. And I expect that you will say that, well, you joined because you wanted to listen to divergent views. But I was wondering, maybe, you applied for this think tank last year, and I'm wondering why we just didn't apply to the Brookings Institute, say, a more moderate one, And I mean, do you support the views of this new conservative think tank? And I mean, do you support their views, their full-hearted support of Netanyahu and his policies about the protesters? Like 17 were killed just about a month ago. And so how do you feel about their policies?
I'm going to cowbell you.
Sure. So I've answered this before publicly. I'm happy to answer here. FDD stands for the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. There's a think tank in Washington, D.C. I wanted to get some professional development, and all these think tanks in D.C. from far left to center to far right have these fellowships in national security. Fellowship's kind of a fancy word. You get together with a group of 30 people in their 30s, you meet once a month, there's dinner, and they bring in a senior leader from government. It's a chance to learn. And I just left Columbia University, which is about as far left as you can get, and I wanted to refine and challenge my own views. So I joined, or I applied and did. I did the first, it's a year-long program. I did the first 3 dinners, then the campaign started, and haven't been back since. When you start this thing, they say, hey, if anyone's running for public office, please let us know. We love to support folks. And when I decided to run, I said, hey, I'm running. They said, oh, it's great. Who's the Democrat you're running against? I said, actually, I'm the Democrat. They said, well, technically, we're a 501c3. We don't really get involved. There were 5 to 10 of us from the left in the room. One of my colleagues was from Congressman Lynch's office from Massachusetts. He's a good Massachusetts liberal. You can look him up.
He's a Democrat.
Yep. So I am for the Iran deal, in complete opposition to how that organization feels about the deal. I just got a question about how do we eliminate some of this tribalism in politics. That's one of the root causes in politics today. Part of it is going and being in a room. I didn't agree with much with the people in the room. There's some folks maybe in this room or all over social media asking about it. The word Jew, Jewish, Israel is usually, and we have to delete most of it. I'm Jewish, in case you didn't know. Israel is our best ally in the Middle East. We need to have a better relationship, and that starts with having some really serious conversations. My parents' generation, when you say Israel, I thought of kibbutzes. Today, it's what you see on the ground with what just happened in the news. We're trying very hard to start a new generation of leadership with folks who are willing to have hard conversations. And you're right, the Prime Minister there is part of the problem. So thank you.
As part of their support, full-hearted support of Netanyahu, they also support Netanyahu's policy of targeted killings and assassinations of those who are considered physical and philosophical threat to the state of Israel. Do you agree or support those targeted killings, those say Palestinians, others who are considered a threat to the state of Israel?
My parents' generation, when I thought about Israel, like I said, the first thing that came to mind was kibbutzes and relationships. It's part of that hippie generation. Today, when you ask the average 20-year-old about Israel, it's targeted killings, it's how protesters are treated. That's what's on the news today. That is a systemic problem between the American-Israeli relationship. I'll tell you the same thing I told the ACLU when we applied for their support. I'm an Army Ranger, and I served as an intelligence officer. I'm also the son of a public defender in the state of Maryland who specializes in the Fourth Amendment. So that's searches and seizures. Some of these technologies that began in our federal government have trickled all the way down to local police departments. There's some major cases in Baltimore City around cell phone technology and tracking them. I'm the guy you want an oversight committee because I speak Army Ranger and I also understand what poor oversight looks like.
I don't think you really answered my question. Are you for or against?
Just a minute. Could I encourage you to talk to him afterwards so we can get, I don't want to cowbell you, but,
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma'am? You?
Is it just to anybody or to a specific person? I'll try Michael. What do you think would be a good approach? You talked about some of the problems with money in politics and things like that. And how do we deal with Citizens United? What would be the approach to get that thing going?
Well, that's a great question, and unfortunately, that's going to be up to the Supreme Court. They're going to have to reverse that, which means that we're going to need to get folks in the Senate to review and approve the appointments to the Supreme Court. And we're going to be stuck with that ruling until either this court or some other court decides to overturn it. But the concept that corporations are people, this is part of the Citizens United decision. Corporations are people. Well, corporations aren't born, they don't die, they don't go to school, they don't get married. Corporations are not people. Money is not speech. Money is power. And the unlimited amounts of money that are being poured into the political system today are corrupting our democracy. Make no mistake. Since the Citizens United decision, we have seen extraordinary amounts of money poured into this system. And it needs to be changed. So the answer to Citizens United is, unfortunately, we've got to rely on the Supreme Court. But at the grassroots, we can create momentum. We can elect appropriate representatives to the Senate and the House that are committed to changing that and committed to also adopting campaign finance reform through legislation adopted by Congress to try to eliminate or at least regulate the amounts of money that are being poured into campaigns. So thank you for that.
Turning over against the wall, direct it to a particular candidate, please.
Jesse, we always talk about campaign reform. Along with campaign reform is not taking money from PACs. Last year I talked to you at BC PAC and given you a little over $1,000. Today I went on with your campaign team and those PAC gave you $5,000. And two more PACs that gave you a total of $5,600. How can you accept money from PACs and say you're for campaign?
Before I answer the question, so Gordon, who's a really strong supporter of Allison, is also running for state delegate himself, so I just want to give him a shout out.
Thank you for your...
You're welcome. So, Gordon, you actually, I think you misunderstood me when we last talked. So we are very, very, very out front and clear in saying we're not accepting corporate PAC money. That's separate from other PACs. So the PAC support we've received thus far, so we just received the endorsement from the AFL-CIO. So we received a contribution from, thank you, from a member of the AFL-CIO. There's a PAC called the Long Island PAC. It's run by former Congressman Steve Israel. He is looking for Democratic candidates who are really strong on national security, because there's some folks who want to take back national security as an issue from the other side of the aisle. There's also a third PAC that we received support from is from a group of Turkish Americans who are very concerned about the relationship between Ankara and Washington. And they're essentially looking for candidates from both sides of the aisle who know where Ankara, the capital of Turkey, is on a map. I joke with that. I thought they were coming in, they were very set of preconditions about my feelings about, or positions on the Syrian civil war, etc. They want that issue. I lived in Syria and they saw my background, an advocate, and somebody could bring these issues. They simply want somebody to talk about these issues and bring it on to the front page. Like I've said to you and to any of our supporters, if you have any questions about any of the people that we're raising money from, I'm happy to have those conversations and walk you through it. It's all on the FEC, all of us. Thank you very much.
Let's go all the way in the back. You?
Okay, great. I would like to hear, I know you guys all got different questions, but I would really like to hear in one sentence from each of you what you see as the most pressing need for our district.
Okay, remember, one sentence.
One sentence.
Cecil County was the second highest county in the state of Maryland last year in terms of opioids fatalities. The number one issue I see in our district is related to the opioids epidemic. Full stop.
Allison, one sentence. We need government that is not corrupt and works for the people, because once you take big money out of politics and you make sure that the government is really there to represent your best interests and not pad somebody's wallet, all of these other issues that we're having trouble addressing will get resolved.
Thanks for that question. I do agree that the opioid epidemic is a crisis that needs to be addressed. My solution would be to explore medical marijuana in states that have adopted that. The opioid death rate has decreased by 25%.
It's just next time you use a conjunction to add those two sentences together.
For me, it's the opioid crisis and the reaching in the pocket by the Republicans to give money from the middle class to the corporations and the wealthy.
Good use of conjunction. Sorry.
I'm a public school teacher. Most of us are well past that young age. Jesse, I would like to know what you plan on doing to make our upcoming generation successful. A lot of kids leave high school and they go to college, or they go to technical school, and they incur a lot of debt. What's your plan on fixing that for our future generations?
Yeah, we talked earlier about how these issues are intersecting. This is a big one. Student debt, so that is, when it comes to education issues, at the platform of a congressional platform, that is something that absolutely ought to be a priority for anyone who hopes to take this seat. So how do we solve it? Part of it is four-year college isn't for everybody. That's a cultural shift, and we need to get there. Part of it is investing in expanding community colleges here in our district and making it free. Part of this, when I talk about jobs of the future, which is solar and cyber and aqua farming, those should be available. The other thing is just we have a serious crisis in education, because I think part of it is it's cultural. So I, as a military veteran, I get thanked for my service. The Vietnam generation didn't get thanked for their service. That pendulum has shifted entirely. Educators, teachers used to be held up as something we could aspire to. That's shifted. You're a school teacher. You don't get thanked for your service. We need to figure out a way to bring the respect and dignity that used to be part of that profession back. Those are the first four things I would do to try to get after student debt.
Just pay them more.
It's paying them more in smaller classrooms. It's more resources in the form of behavioral health and coding and all that stuff. You're absolutely right, sir.
So, just to clarify, you are for making community colleges free?
Correct.
Okay, let's go to this side of the room. Debbie.
So, I'm interested in a candidate that can defeat Randy Harris. That's my that's how I'm filtering it. Can you debate with him? Can you do all these things? But Mr. Pullen, you said something that scared me a little bit, which is you started out with your very first line being, "I'm your only progressive candidate," or something like that, in your introduction, that you were a progressive candidate. When I hear that, what concerns me is I don't want to be divided any longer. That's why we're in the situation that I think we were in partially. So can you tell us how you would bring us together as a unified party to fight Andy Harris?
Well, thanks for that question.
In a gerrymandered district.
Thanks for that question, and I want to make a clarification. I don't think I said I was the only progressive candidate.
I'm sorry, that's what I heard you say.
But I want to let's be clear about what I mean by progressive candidate. When I talk about myself as a progressive, I'm an FDR Democrat. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He stepped, those are the kind of policies that I support. He stepped in a moment of crisis in this country, created benefits for workers, benefits for families. That was what was needed. We are at the same point in my mind, economically. We have just come through a terrible crash in '08. The benefits that used to flow to the middle class and workers are no longer flowing to the middle class and workers. We need to restructure our economy so that workers and middle class families can survive. I talk to so many folks that are worried about health care, worried about education, worried about just making ends meet day to day. Most people, if they have a $400 emergency, can't take care of that without borrowing money or going or selling some assets. So that's a problem. So my view is that the Republican base they are on our side if we can get that message to them, if they will listen. I want to work with them and for them and help their families, help their kids. I want to create new jobs and give the middle class and the working folks a real opportunity to succeed in this economy. So thanks.
All the way in the back.
Michael, for years the Republicans have been selling us a load of BS that environmental protection is bad for the economy, that it kills jobs, and so on and so forth. And most of us, I think, have learned to disregard that by now. But lately, with the Trump administration, Congress people like Andy Harris, the corporations and the people that support them, the Koch brothers, so forth, have just run amok. They're dismantling everything. Now, what would you propose? What would be your major initiatives when you get into Congress in terms of reconciling environmental protection and a healthy, sustainable economy? And what do you think could be reasonably accomplished there in the short term?
Well, thanks for that question. So the first thing that we do, when the Democrats take the House in 2018, we will be then in a position to actually exercise oversight authority over this administration. What that means is that we will have the opportunity to hold the EPA accountable to literally administer the laws that exist on the books without undoing the environmental protection that have been carefully negotiated and built up over decades. So the first thing we do is we hold this administration accountable through the Oversight Committee. The next thing we do is that we review all of the regulations that have been repealed and try to put a stop to that as soon as we can in terms of keeping those protections in place. If we get a majority in the House, we will be able to prevent further deterioration of the environmental protections that have been built up, and that will be one of my priorities. So thanks.
So I was struck by, when I was reading up on the website, I was struck by everybody's promotion of alternative energy, specifically solar and wind. Mr. Worton, would you answer this question? Would you ever consider nuclear energy? Around here, we actually get about 25% of our electricity from nuclear.
Actually not. I don't think nuclear's ever been safe. I think we saw what happened in Japan. I think when they had the tidal wave, there's still nuclear fallout, if you will, coming across. There were many of our naval ships that were damaged as a part of that. The path forward is obviously not carbon-based. We need to take and get away from carbon-based offshore drilling, fracking, those types of things. I really do think that the wave of the future is to invest further, not just in the current solar, but to increase the solar output, because right now it's only probably 24 or 26%, I think, at max, and to have the additional wind energy. And right now the Republicans are fighting against that. So no, I'm not truly a proponent for nuclear. I think the the design and the long term of those facilities is such that they pose too much risk to our society.
This question's for Jesse. How do you think you're going to bring the party together to defeat Andy Harris?
The question was, how do I think I can bring the party together to beat Andy Harris? Gerrymander district. So for a Democrat to flip this seat, there needs to be a couple things. Number one, needs to be unique timing. You need to have a really strong message and a really smart run campaign. You need the resources to communicate with people. Tawnytown, Carroll County to Ocean Pines, Worcester, it's 3.5 hours with no traffic, so you can't shake everybody's hand. You have to be able to build a coalition. If Eisenhower is running this district, you'd have a great chance. Because Eisenhower was great at building coalitions in World War II. The coalition you have to build to beat Andy Harris starts with the far left, socialist, all the way to the disaffected right. Here in Cecil County, we are very lucky to be working with and endorsed by the Cecil County Progressive Caucus, which formed out of the Bernie Sanders chapter here in Cecil. These folks turned out over 1,000 votes for Bernie here, which is it's like having 1,000 people root for Duke basketball. It's a big deal. I mentioned AFL-CIO. We also have been very lucky to receive support from General Wes Clark, who ran for president in 2004, and then you get to a Congressman Wayne Gilchrist. It's far left to disaffected right. We're making it a referendum about Andy Harris because we realize that if you regret your vote for the president, I don't need to throw it in your face. You're already coming. So that's the basics of how we're thinking about doing it. Thank you.
It's been pointed out to me that this has been a little inequitable. Does anybody have a question for Allison?
Yes. To be fair, it's to anybody on the panel, but my question is, should it be a requirement for public office to release your tax returns, and have you done so?
Have I released my taxes?
Your tax returns, yes.
No, I have not released my tax returns. I don't know that anybody here has released their tax returns, but sure. If you want to see my tax returns, you can. I am a middle-class family. I donate a lot to
Should it be a requirement?
Should it be a requirement?
For public office to be able to release your tax?
Not just the
Should
tax
there be
returns.
transparency?
Not just the tax returns. I want to see where people are receiving financial incentives from anywhere. Whether you're talking about stock holdings, we don't need people who are getting rich from the industries that they're regulating. There's no reason Price should have had, millions, billions of dollars of stock in the medical industry. There's no reason that Andy Harris is over there beating the war drum for North Korea. Meanwhile, one of his top 5 donors stands to get rich if and only if we go to war with a country that has chemical or biological weapons. So, that kind of thing, we need that out. And so we absolutely need to know who is the puppet master. And when you're looking at me, I still work. I can't quit my job. I have a son to raise and a mortgage to pay. And I really just want government that works for the people. I'm sick of it being bogged down with money, or the idea that money trumps, the hundreds of supporters that are backing me right now. Or, the enthusiastic support that no other candidate will see. We have so much money in this system between the privilege that you need to run, how insulated they end up from their policies. That kind of thing does not work for the American public. We need Congress that looks more like the everyday person, and that's how the everyday people get their problems addressed.
My question's for Allison. As you're aware, most of Congress, women occupy 51% of the country, but we only have 20% of representation in Congress. Tell me, in terms of paid family leave and in terms of health care, are you more for a single payer option or are you more for a public option, like Medicare for all or single payer? And what is your take on paid family leave?
On paid family leave? Okay, so I'm going to do paid family leave first. We need paid family leave. We need caregivers to have leave, because especially as we have an aging baby boomer population, we have a lot of people falling into the sandwich generation where they are trying to raise their children and to care for an aging parent. And then there are very few labor protections to protect people's jobs and significant financial hits. It's very difficult for people to overcome that situation. That's how I ended up being a business owner in the first place. And so we need that paid leave. We need to have protections. We need to have paid FMLA and strengthened FMLA so that you have job protections for people who have these obligations. And we need paid maternity and paternity leave, because until men are taking on 50% of the duties at home, women are never going to have equality. Woo-hoo! Regarding healthcare, the best program I've ever used in my entire life is CHIP. When I could not buy insurance, my kids were on CHIP. Vision is covered, dental is covered, mental health is covered, your prescriptions are covered. All of these things ought to be covered, because it's not just health care of the body, you need dental coverage also. That has a key role in your health overall. You need vision. You know, it shouldn't be that, there should never be a medical bankruptcy, ever. Ever. That should not happen.
Okay, ma'am?
Allison, as a spouse of a military person, I would like you to share what you think, what experiences you had and your child had, and also what you think needs to be done to support the veterans once they return from active duty.
Okay, so I once had to explain to a toddler every night for a year that Daddy was coming back from Iraq. That's very difficult on families. It's difficult for the children. You have a lot of impacts of parents not being around. We all know what those are, right? Or I hope we do. Pull me after if you don't know. And that was very difficult. It's very difficult on families, and so we need to be careful what kind of conflicts we're getting into overseas, and we need to make sure that we are paying our service members adequately so that nobody is ever relying on government subsidies to get by if they're serving in the military.
Amen.
Woo! When you get out, there are a lot of problems with transition. For instance, military training is not always recognized in the civilian world. So my ex was a helicopter mechanic, except he couldn't get a civilian helicopter mechanic job without going back to school for 18 months for an A&P license. He ended up floating all over the country doing that kind of work before I finally said, you know what, use your GI Bill. You'd make a great engineer, go to school. So we put him through school, except by that point he'd been out of school for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is, since high school, and he needed prerequisites. The GI Bill does not cover a full 4-year degree anymore if you have to have prerequisites. So we need to make sure that nobody's going into debt when they're using the GI Bill. And we need to have reciprocity for the civilian and the military licenses, because if you can fix a Black Hawk, you can fix a civilian helicopter too. There's no reason not to have that kind of thing. So we just need to make sure that the veterans and their families are being taken care of as they deserve, because they've done time. Both the veterans and the families serve here at home.
My question is for all of you. I wonder, are any of you members of the NRA, and will you accept money from the NRA?
Okay, these are one answer questions, one word answers, okay?
Yep.
Is that okay with you? Okay. Are you a member, and will you accept money all the way down the road?
No and no. No and no.
Thank you.
Are we doing one word or 2 words?
What's your question?
No and no.
No and no, and I did get the endorsement of the Moms Demand Action as the sensible going candidate.
Hey, so did the mom.
Two-word answer, please.
No to both, thank you.
Pardon?
No to both.
Oh,
Thank you.
So that's a clean sweep. Okay. Young man there.
I was just wondering, what, if anything, would each of you try to do about the electoral college?
Could you say that louder, please?
What, if anything, would any of you try to do about the electoral college?
Okay, Michael wants to tackle that one.
I'll take that one. So the Electoral College is actually in the Constitution, and there's not much we can do absent a constitutional amendment. As you know, that takes quite a considerable amount of effort, and it doesn't seem likely that's going to happen, since the Republicans have won 2 of the, I guess, 5 elections since 2000, after losing the popular vote and winning the Electoral College. So, short answer is there's not much that we can do about that short of a constitutional amendment.
Young man here. Yeah, the one with the blue shirt. I mean, I have to call on somebody who has Elizabeth Warren on their shirt. Come on.
So my question is for all the candidates. If you could just give a yes or no answer with a 1-sentence explanation of why. So my question is about the 190-mile-long fracked natural gas pipeline that has been proposed for Maryland's eastern shore. The pipeline would start up in Rising Sun here in Cecil County and go all the way down the entire eastern shore, passing over many Chesapeake tributaries along the way before passing into Virginia in order to provide fuel for Virginia. Do you oppose the construction of this pipeline?
What? Hold on. You want a one-word answer, yes or no, but then you want a one-sentence what?
Explanation of why they say yes or no.
Okay. One-sentence explanation after a one-word answer.
Oh, this is Jake. He's running for Central Committee and came up from Salisbury today, so he should Jake, our position is that we would oppose it. The future of our energy in our district and across the state, across the country, is in renewables, just like we've been talking about.
Yes, I would oppose it for all the reasons Jesse said, and also I don't believe it can be done safely, and I'm concerned about the health impacts if something goes wrong.
I would oppose it as well. We need to get our energy industry onto solar and wind and away from fossil fuels.
So I would be against it, primarily because of all the safety issues, but frankly to reduce our carbon input even further.
Okay, who would like to have the last audience question? All the way in the back there. Yes, stand up.
1 in 6 children is hungry in the richest country in the world. Yet Republicans have been looking to cut food stamps, they've cut housing, and they're taking away supports for struggling families. What are your priorities, and how do you propose to help children and their families?
Steve?
First off, we need to redistribute the wealth. We can start that with increasing the minimum wage. Frankly, people are making far too little money to be able to support children. The entire tax situation where the money went to the corporations and to the wealthy instead of going back to the poor and or the middle class is just absolutely, totally ridiculous. We need to have a change in that and reverse where the money's going to. And I say that not only because it will help with folks as far as feeding them, nourishing them, educating them, but also the money to go back into the middle class and the poor will grow our economy more than anything else that has ever been done. This whole trickle-down economics, the money's just going right into the rich and going into a stock buyback. So I'm for increasing the minimum wage, getting money to the people that need it, cutting the taxes for the people that need it, and then growing our economy. I think all those things will help ameliorate some of those issues that you spoke about. Oh, and as far as, I'm sorry, I do have a little more time. all the cuts going to the programs, like the heating programs and all the other programs that the Republicans are trying to cut, just goes to show that the focus is not on the average person trying to get by day to day. It's on a corporation trying to get another $1 billion, and I'm totally against that.
Okay, we're going to go with closing speeches. Each candidate has 3 minutes for a closing speech. But don't get up and disappear after they're finished, because I have a couple more announcements after they're done, some housekeeping things. So we'll start with Jesse. He has 3 minutes.
First up, we've been doing the, I want to thank my fellow participants up here, the fellow candidates. Public office is really difficult, and in the age of social media, it's really hard. So I just want to say that. I never thought I'd pursue political office. I did my time in the military and 4 deployments to Afghanistan. My wife served as a police officer, and we thought we'd done our public service. The purpose of this what we're doing here is to unseat Andy Harris. And to unseat Andy Harris, this is a gerrymandered district with an entrenched incumbent. And it's going to take a great message, and it's going to take a lot of energy, and it's going to take a community built around a campaign. I want everyone in the room to remember that we are all in this together, and as much as everybody up here wants to win this primary, whoever comes out of this thing, we cannot do Andy Harris's work for him. And whoever wins can't be so bloody we've done Andy Harris's work for him. So in the event that we do not win the primary, I pledge to support and send the word out to my supporters to support whoever the nominee is. I got a lot of questions today about related to campaign finance. I think it's a toxic issue, just like gerrymandering and like everybody else. We've raised a lot of money in our campaign. The reason that this race is currently sitting on the national party's list of 101 districts across the country they consider in play is because we raised more money than Andy Harris in our first quarter of our campaign. You can't retail politics this district. It's just too big. We're doing 500 miles a week in my truck. I've eaten muskrat in Dorchester County. You can't shake every hand. Part of it is you have to be able to communicate with voters. And this is a fantastic turnout today. I think this is the best run forum, by the way, we've had. It's number 5 or 6, I think. 90% of the folks in this race haven't tuned in yet, the voters. You have to be able to go talk to them. I want to bring it back to that coalition. To unseat Andy Harris as a Democrat, you got to go from far left, disaffected right. We were so lucky to get to work with the folks from the Pending Progressive Caucus. Lisa, can I put you on? This is Lisa. She's a member of the caucus. I had to transfer in from the Green Party to the Democratic Party to support me. That's the coalition you have to build. So it starts with Lisa and ends with Wayne Gilchrist, and there'll be a lot of veterans issues in the general. So I just want to say thank you very much. We'll be here. My team's in the back. Carlos, that's my campaign manager. Please raise your hand. Will, right there with the shirt on, and Sasha, Sam's right there, and Sasha is there in the hat. So thank you very much. We'll be here to talk to you guys. Thank you.
Over a year ago, I met Andy Harris. Obviously, he was a threat to my livelihood, and I decided something needed to be done. And you know what I did at the time? I looked around for other candidates. Mike was thinking about it. Nobody else was out there, though. And I had this federal experience. I have a wealth of life experience, which we normally don't see in Congress. And I believe that that is the reason that a lot of our problems never get addressed, because our representatives simply don't live those problems. I understand being a caregiver. I understand what the military families go through. I understand dealing with the special needs system. I understand owning a business, raising children, being middle class, like actually middle class, and being one of those people where that $400 thing, that could, in some cases, do me in. And I went and I looked for other candidates. Nobody was out there. I went and I started talking to the people from the party. I talked to the local electeds and things like that. And they said, "You're a great candidate. Why don't you go run for something you can win?" And I said, I don't care how hard it is to beat Andy Harris. One, there's not a single woman in this entire district that's going to look at me next to him and think that what he said to me was okay. And that's a matter of awareness and raising awareness. I've also got a better track record than Andy Harris, of all people, the fiscal conservative, of saving the federal government money. That is my area of expertise. You want to talk about smart spending? I can talk to you about smart spending. I've been doing it for a decade. You want to talk about healthcare, which is the #1 issue in this district, or education? I am the graduate of a public school from this district, and I am the mother of a public school student in this district, and I have used just about every kind of healthcare and health insurance that you can imagine. You want to complain about Medicare, I can commiserate with you. You want to talk about the benefits, I understand them too, from having dealt with it from my mother. We need that life experience in there. Beyond that, people need hope, okay? And that's why I've been really good at rounding up disenfranchised voters and flipping more Republicans and libertarians, even those from the hard right who still support Trump, to Democrat, to support me in the primary. There are literally hundreds. And with Trump as president, we should not underestimate the value of social media. I have 25,000 followers on Twitter. I have the largest social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, coming out of this district, if anybody here. That is what we're moving towards. I'm also available and responsive, and I believe in government that is honest, has integrity, is authentic, and works and shows up for the everyday people, because it's actually of, for, and by the people.
So thank you all for coming today, and by your presence here, you voted with your feet. You have shown that you're engaged, that you're enthusiastic, that you're concerned, as we all are, about the state of our democracy. I'm in this race because I believe that our democracy is under attack, and this administration is refusing to do its job to defend our elections and the democracy that we've come to expect from our government. And Andy Harris in particular, and all the Republicans in Congress, are refusing to do their job to exercise the appropriate level of oversight. I learned some tough lessons in high school playing football for a coach who demanded hard work, discipline, leadership. I learned those lessons at that age and was elected to the All-State team because I contributed to the team. It was all about the team. And like the other candidates here, we're doing this for this district. I pledge my support to whichever candidate wins, because this is not about me. It's never been about me. It's about taking back our democracy from a Republican stranglehold that refuses to listen to the will of the people. Andy Harris, exhibit number 1. I just felt personally, I felt so compelled to get into this race that I could not stay out of it. So I'm in this race for the finish. Beyond this campaign, I'm in this fight to the finish until we get some real fundamental change for this district and for our country. We're fighting for our kids and our grandkids. We're fighting for our educational system, our environment. We're fighting for the very notion that we live in a country that does continue the promise of America to the next generation. That this generation will have the same opportunities or better than we had when we were kids. I've seen how government can work. I've been in the room when the tough decisions were made. I've seen people come and testify from the heart. about things that are important to them and their children and their future. I've seen the tough decisions. I want to be in the room. I want to represent you. I want to listen to your concerns and be there for you. When I'm in the room, you're in the room. When I'm in Congress, you're in Congress. When I'm on the floor, you'll be on the floor. Thanks very much.
I think all the candidates up here have all pretty much said the same thing. We're all in agreement. We may pinch each other a little bit here or there, but people want to know what our differences are. Frankly, we're going to support each other no matter who wins the primary. So I definitely agree with Michael and Jesse. Frankly, I got in this race last year. I was retired. Really happy being retired. I started to see the attacks on the federal employees, which really bugged me because we lost our representative, Ted Stevens, from Alaska years ago. He used to take care of the federal employees. I watched as my mother was dying and she was on Medicare, and they wouldn't allow her to go into hospice unless she turned off her dialysis, part of Medicare, because it was her primary diagnosis. She was bedridden, she couldn't get out of bed. I was living with them for 3 months. I watched the attacks on the Affordable Health Care Act. And I said to my wife, I'm going to enter the race. And I said to my treasurer, John Kovac, I'm going to enter the race. And he volunteered to help me. And I said, I'm going to do it because I'm sick of everything that's going on. I'm sick of watching the Republicans tear everything down that was built with the Affordable Care Act. I'm sick of watching them give all the money back to everybody. I'm sick of watching them try and take the money away from Medicare and Social Security. And then, after promising that they would not raise the deficit and give money back to the middle class, they gave permanent cuts to the corporations and temporary ones to the middle class and did nothing but drive the deficit up and made the fulfillment of the reduction of Medicare a certainty unless we change things. And that's the reason that I got back into politics, or got into it because I was a federal employee. I know firsthand what's going on with opioids. I've seen it. It's horrible. We need to fix it. I'm willing to jump in and do it. I think I've given some practical solutions for it. I understand what it takes to work down in the Pentagon. I know what it takes to work on the Hill. I did it for a long time. It really was not enjoyable. There were times it could be. But frankly, I want to jump back in and I want to help the people of Maryland, the families of Maryland, and the people that really need it. That's why I'm running. I look for your vote. I thank you all for coming out. This is the best turnout. And whoever wins this, guaranteed, we're going to win this seat in the House. Thank you very much.
Okay, you all know that you never come to a program without some commercials. So, since I get to be the moderator today, I would like to give each one of our candidates the potential for having a Cecil County Library card. We are in the library lets us use their facilities for nothing. So we hope that you all, if one of you are successful, that you will support the library system as part of the educational system. And even if you don't, support us anyway. One other commercial. As you know, this is Cinco de Mayo. So we would encourage you, if you have the inclination after this is over, to have some good Mexican food. That we have 2 establishments that I know of, there may be more, I know these 2, in Cecil County. One is the Sabor Latino, which is on Route 40 in the Staples Big Lots Shopping Center. The other one, if you're going north towards Rising Sun, is the Riviera Maya. And these are our neighbors. So if you can support them, maybe not today, support them another day. I want to encourage the candidates. You all said that you would support each other, and I realize that, but a lot of you have a lot of individual information and expertise, and whoever wins this primary, I hope that the rest of you will make the winner available of your information, because you all have strengths in different areas, and the ideal candidate to defeat Andy Harris would be someone who was a combination of all of you put together. So please do that. I'm overwhelmed with everything that's been going on in Cecil County this week, that you all took time, because as they say on the airlines, you had a lot of options here. And you came to spend it with us. So thank you. Pat has one more.
Let's thank our moderator, please. When I first asked Phyllis if she would do this, she kind of looked at me and paused for a moment, and I thought, oh no, she's going to say no. But she's so committed to this and so committed to our community. I don't think I've ever heard Phyllis say no to anybody, so we really appreciate it. And thank you again, candidates, for coming. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. We hope it was worthwhile for you. We hope it was worthwhile for everyone who came. I'm not going to go into a long talk about the upcoming dates. I think most of you know that the early voting starts on June 14th. I think you know the primary is coming. There's information in the back. There's pamphlets and brochures about voting, where you go, what you do, whatever questions you have about absentee voting, whatever. So please stop and pick that information up on your way out. One last thing. I would like to ask the candidates to remain for a couple minutes, and members of the Central Committee, the Democrat Club Elections and Events Committee to come up front for a picture. Thank you.
Can we also get the, if you're on the board for the Democrat Club as well?
Yeah.
And if you